But the key to it, though, Mike, is to map to the habits of an audience.
Today, I am very excited to be joined by Tom Webster. If you don't know who Tom is, he is a podcasting industry analyst and partner at Sounds Profitable, a trade organization focused on growing the podcasting industry. He's also author of a brand new book called The Audience is Listening, a little guide to building a big podcast. He's also host of the Sounds Profitable podcast. Tom, welcome back to the show. How you doing today?
I'm great, Mike. What an honor to be back here. It's been a while.
Yeah, it's super awesome to have you back. Today, Tom and I are going to explore the state of the podcasting industry and how to create a better quality podcast. Now, Tom, you're right. It's been a little while. Last time you were on the show was 2016, which seems forever ago. So why don't you catch us up on what's been going on with you since then and bring us up to the present with all the great stuff you got going on.
Well, I stayed in my apartment for 2.5 years, came out and got COVID anyway. That happened, I think, in that period of time.
Yes.
But when we last talked, I was with a market research company called Edison Research, which is where I authored or co-authored a lot of the research that fuels the podcast industry today. In 2022, though, I joined up with Brian Barletta to become a partner in Sounds Profitable, which at the time was a newsletter serving the business side of the podcasting industry. But we had some grand designs to really create a service that would essentially function as the trade industry for the organization. And in 2 years, we've been able to do that. We just signed our 180th partner. And, we're serving the publishers, we're serving creators, we're serving ad tech, we're serving buyers, all in the service, to say that word again, of helping to grow the industry and helping for it to claim its rightful share of monetization, advertising dollars, and anything else that podcasters need to build careers.
So does this kind of imply that prior to you guys coming together and doing this, there really was no professional trade organization for the podcasting world?
That's correct. There had been some abortive attempts. I was involved with one maybe 14 years ago called the Association for Downloadable Media. And I think, the podcast industry for you Oklahoma fans was a lot of farmers and cowmen then. And it was really difficult to pull people together, I think. But today, I think we have been able to serve common needs enough that, and I think it worked because we didn't declare ourselves, we are the trade organization. We waited until we got big enough and then, oh, by the way, this is what we are trying to do. And I think that was the key to it.
So tell us a little bit about this organization. Who is it for? And what exactly are the things that you're doing and that you plan to do, just so people that might be listening that have podcasts might, be interested in this?
Yeah, so we are a partnership-driven organization, but a lot of what we do is available free to everybody. So we put out a daily newsletter called The Download, which really focuses on the business side of things, the industry side of things. But once a week, we also put out on generally Wednesdays, a larger kind of think piece that I write every week, which is really designed for everybody. It's really designed to help creators. So there's the content side of things. For partnership, we have, networking events, connections. We make warm connections for people. We also do things like we sponsor private lounges at pretty much every podcast conference. So people who want to have meetings and our Sounds Profitable partners have a place that's not just pipe and drape at a conference to be able to go and take meetings, and we'll do sessions there. And we also have our own events as a part of that as well. And then the final thing that we do sort of publicly is a huge research initiative. And we commission lots and lots of research. We're putting out a study as we record this, a giant study tomorrow, which will be out by the time this airs, called The Podcast Landscape, which is our the second annual kind of flagship survey for us. And that's really designed to size the market, size the industry, see what's holding it back, see why people do and do not listen. And we're continually generating insights from that. Behind the scenes, though, we're also doing things like this year we wrote a gigantic check to sponsor a full day at South by Southwest. It was the first time South by had a dedicated podcasting day that was heavily promoted by them. It was a big success. We'll be back next year. And we also have the first dedicated day at Advertising Week coming up this year, which is also going to be co-branded by Sounds Profitable. I'll be keynoting both of those events. And all of this is designed to get podcasting in front of other buyers and out of the bubble that we're in terms of people buying into the medium.
Fascinating. So somewhere along the journey, you decided to write a book, and we have had your wife on the show, and we're having her back. She's obviously also written a couple of books. But what prompted you to write a book? And just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I wrote the book because I was asked very similar questions by so many podcasters. And every time they asked me, I would regret that my answer was going to either be too long or perhaps unkind. And so I wrote the book essentially as a thing that I could just say, here, this is what I have for you. And that's this, Mike. It's when a lot of times people will come and ask me, how can I grow my podcast? How can I grow my podcast? And I think a couple of things when I hear that. Number one, I know what they're asking me for. They're asking me for where else can I promote it, right? Where else can I advertise it? And this makes me a little bit sad because I will listen to their show, and my first answer is really, well, you should make a better show. And that it sounds unkind when I say it that way, but it's not, because I have so much research behind me in the rearview mirror. And every single time I ask the question, how did you discover your favorite podcast? How do you discover new podcasts? It's because it was recommended. And it's recommended by a friend, recommended by family. And people only recommend high quality things, right?
Right.
So the first step is to get your house in order. And that, that's something that I always think. But the other thing is sometimes when people ask that, it's the wrong question. And it sounds like it's the right question. How do I grow my podcast? But they're often asking it to me because it stopped growing. And that's the right question. Why did my podcast stop growing?
Right.
And if you go from that standpoint and say, all right, it has stopped. Why did it stop? As opposed to how can I, stick it in more Coke machines? Then you start to ask even better questions, I think.
Outstanding. Well, I'm really excited, Tom, to dive into this. For those that are listening, and Tom knows this, I have quite a few different shows that I've produced over my career. As of today, we produced 3. As of about a month ago, we produced 4 different shows. And I'm really excited to kind of dig into the state of the industry with you. But first, I want to ask a question that I think is on the minds of some people. Why should businesses or creators create podcasts or continue to create podcasts for those that maybe are in a little bit of a slump?
Yeah, well, it's 2 very different answers, isn't it, Mike? I think.
Yes.
Look, if you're a creator, make your art, right? If you're a writer, you got to write, and if you want, if you love the medium of podcasting, you got to podcast. You don't necessarily have a right to an audience. You don't necessarily deserve monetization. You have to earn those things. You have to work for those things. But if you're an individual creator, I would think that the reason why you would want to either start or continue a podcast, I think the best reason is you already have an audience and you want to engage with them more deeply. It's very, very hard to build a podcast audience from zero. But if you already have an audience that engages you in other ways and you're looking for a way for them to get to know you better, for the people who really want to spend a half an hour with you or even an hour with you, then make a podcast. Now, my answer for companies is a little bit different. Not every company should make a podcast because I think a podcast is not just a piece of content marketing. A white paper is a piece of content marketing. A podcast is an entertainment. And when you're asking for somebody's time, then it should either, it should challenge or entertain or come from genuine expertise, hopefully a combination of all 3 in a way that makes you proud and in a way that entertains an audience. Because your competition, for this podcast, your competition is not necessarily another social media marketing podcast, right? It might be watching something else on YouTube. It might be watching something on Netflix. It might be going for a walk. So you have to create an entertainment. Your show has to be about something. And that thing that it is about has to be about your audience and not about your product, because nobody wants to be sold.
Yeah, and I'll just add my thoughts into this. First of all, I agree with one of your first points that starting a podcast is a way to connect with them far more deeply. While it is a one-to-many, non-interactive medium, I have heard from thousands of people over the years how they spend time with me, listening to me interview people in the most intimate of places, right? On an airplane, surrounded by strangers, showering, walking the dog, doing the dishes, on aircraft carriers, on ponies. I mean, like, yeah, everything you could possibly imagine. They choose to listen instead of listening to music. They choose to listen to me interviewing people like you, Tom, and that develops a sense of loyalty and a sense of connection that I experienced many times going to events where people are jazzed to meet me, just because they've been a regular listener to the show. And that, from a marketing perspective, is very powerful because people do business with those whom they know and they like and they trust. And this is a powerful way to establish that. Now to the other side, which is the business side. I do feel like there is something special to having an audience that shows up however often you publish, every week. And I do feel like if you can build this loyal audience, that you can, promote your own products and services, and that can be very valuable for your business. And for businesses that spend a lot of money promoting on Facebook and YouTube and Instagram, I kind of feel like this is perhaps a more economical channel for them to play the long game on. And I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that.
I think it's a much better converting channel for sure. And, we put out loads of advertising and monetization related research in the past couple of years. And, even for categories like, true crime, right? A lot of advertisers stay away from things like true crime. But, we put out a study a couple of years ago called Safe and Sound. And people love the advertisers who support that content because they love that content. They have self-selected for that content. They have self-selected because they're absorbed by mystery and police procedures, and they want to help and all these things. And they recognize the brands that support them. And that brand could be you, right? You could be sponsoring that kind of content yourself, so that it's not a podcast about your product. It's a podcast about something that your audience is fascinated by that isn't miles away from your product, but you're bringing it to them and they are grateful to you. And I saw a piece of research that just came out today as we're recording this from one of our partners, SiriusXM. They put out a piece of research that 1 in 3 podcast listeners feel much stronger trust towards brands that advertise repeatedly on their favorite podcasts. So there's a deepening impact to that, where people go, you know what, they have been with us for a long time and I'm really enjoying this content. People are aware of that. But again, it's got to be about something that ties that audience together, that unites them, that's not about your product, because no one tunes into a 30-minute ad.
And I love this because this is another angle, right? We're marketers. We're all marketers listening to this show. You don't have to create a podcast. You can go support an existing podcast that's got the ideal audience that you're trying to attract. And, maybe this is a perfect transition into the kind of my next question, which is talk to us about kind of the state of the industry and where the podcasting world is right now, because I just think this could be a big unlock for people. Like, it's a lot of work to create a podcast. Tom knows this. I know this. Everybody knows this, but it's not that challenging to go out there and support a show that might have your perfect target audience. And that could be really, really big upside. So Tom, just kind of give us your general state of where the podcasting industry is right now. I know you recently came off of an event and you spoke about this. So kind of bring us up to speed for those of us that might not be familiar with what's been going on.
Yeah, it's at really an inflection point right now. I think, last year the industry was down a bit, and, didn't quite make its targets in terms of revenue. The IAB estimates that every year, and it fell a little bit short of that. But, that happened across advertising supported media, right? Podcasting, I think, took it on the chin in the popular press, but, trust me, radio, TV, magazines were all getting hit much, much, much harder. But it's turned around, and we're starting to get some big deals now. And I have mixed feelings about them. In the past week or two, we've had 2 different podcasts get brand new $100 million deals. Alex Cooper at Call Her Daddy got a brand new $100 million deal. And the Kelceys, Travis and Jason Kelce, the New Heights podcast, which is a top 10 show, just got $100 million from Wondery. So those deals are starting to happen again. And they bring attention. They bring attention from advertisers. They bring attention from audience. And my mixed feelings, though, are that it's starting to bifurcate a little bit between the haves and the have-nots. The people on, platforms that are closed and people that are on open platforms. And, podcasting started as an open medium, and it doesn't necessarily have to exist as an open medium, right? We watch videos in open media, and we watch videos that are exclusive to Netflix. That is the way of the world. There's nothing wrong with that. But I do hope that we more than just hope that trickles down to the independents and to growing the audience, because we have to ultimately keep people actively renewed with their engagement in podcasting, the medium, and not just a particular show, because shows come and go.
So just to clarify, for those that may not understand, Wondery is an Amazon-owned company, right? And
Correct.
is the deal that they're going to only be available on Amazon Music and they're pulling it off of the other things? Is that kind of what you're implying with these exclusive deals, or am I not hearing that correctly?
I don't know about that one in particular. That actually just came out minutes to me before I started recording this. In some cases they are exclusive deals.
Like Spotify has done deals.
Spotify has done exclusive deals. They've kind of gotten away from that a little bit. But it could also be windowed deals, right? Where it's available for a short time exclusively, and then it opens up for back content and things like that. So, I do believe in podcasting as an open medium. I believe in that very strongly, but that doesn't mean that has to be at the exclusion of everything else. So, there's, just as in television, we have free ad-supported streaming media, and we have exclusive, premier ad-free streaming media, and that's the way of the world. And podcasting is not going to be any different.
So if we think about, you mentioned IAB, and I'm familiar with them because back in the day when I worked in traditional marketing, I know they were the certifying organization that would tell you, like, this is how many impressions you're getting with this magazine or that. If the last year wasn't as good, does that mean that there were fewer people listening to podcasts? Is that kind of what we're implying here? Or is it the Apple thing that where Apple decided they were not going to automatically download podcasts that people weren't really listening to? Or is there something else going on here?
Yeah, the Apple thing is a whole other ball of wax, which we can get into. The audience never stopped growing. The audience grew last year. The audience is growing this year as well. So the audience actually never stopped growing. There was definitely some global economic pressure that happened.
Okay.
It affected all advertising supported media. And, when you're an ad buyer or with an agency or with a brand, and something scary happens, there's a flight to safety, a flight to comfort. And so there were pullbacks all over the place, but it certainly wasn't audience related at all. And now it's all kind of surging back. The iOS 17 thing, for those who aren't familiar with that, there was let's call it a feature, or so Apple thought, that when you moved to a new operating system and you upgraded to iOS, and it would re-download all the podcasts that you would subscribe to, and that created a lot of podcast downloads that were not actually listened to, and it was unique to Apple. It was not an industry-wide thing, and Apple's market share has declined pretty significantly actually over the last 10 years. But if you kind of think it through, those shows were never listened to in the first place. They were not necessarily unheard ads, right? So conversion was not actually impacted. It was just this sort of download number that was impacted, but the actual results, especially for people who do direct response marketing, where you're giving people a promo code or something like that, that actually didn't change.
Yeah, but a lot of people that have had a lot of shows that have been out for a long time definitely saw their numbers drop pretty substantially. And it was because Apple, essentially my understanding is if you haven't listened to the last 6 episodes, they basically pause the download and force you to reactivate it, which in hindsight is wise. But it was kind of especially amongst the larger shows, I think it was a pretty big shock in metrics. Now, I'm just curious from your perspective, are you seeing any changes from daily shows versus weekly shows? Any changes in frequency and or length of show?
Yeah, shows are getting, look, there's 4 million podcasts. So, the trends that I'm going to talk about here are not necessarily trends for the whole industry. But I will tell you that if you have a good show and can sustain quality, more is more gooder. More creates more downloads. But the key to it, though, Mike, is to map to the habits of an audience. If you're putting out stuff more frequently than the audience wants to make time for, then they actually get stressed about it and give up. They feel like they're never going to catch up, right? That was why, by the way, if anybody whoever watched the show 24 when that was out years ago with Kiefer Sutherland, that show ended up getting canceled because people would fall behind and get stressed out. They actually did a lot of research about that. So you can definitely publish too frequently. You can publish too much for the quality of content that you have. And as far as length goes, I'm always of the mindset that the ideal length of a show should be a little bit shorter than the last one. There's a lot
really? Okay.
there's a lot of padding in podcasts, and for better or worse, some of the exemplars that we have from the early days of podcasting that are still with us and still very good shows that attracted those early listeners can be quite long. But you also have to think about, all right, I'm coming out with a brand new show. Where is the listener going to put that? It's going to take the place of something. They don't all of a sudden get a 25-hour day. Where's it going to go? And you have to think about, is it going to replace something else that they already like? Well, I don't know about that. So where are they going to stick it? And if you start to think about the blocks of time where people might insert a brand new show, make a brand new habit, those blocks aren't very big. So my advice for a brand new show is to make it as short as you possibly can. And then maybe you grow into something or a second show.
Absolutely fascinating. I love all this, and there's so much I can say about this, but what I really want to dig into is how we can improve a show, because the subtitle of your show is, the subtitle of your podcast is, I'll just say the audience is listening, A Little Guide to Building a Big Podcast, right? So the idea here is like, hey, we have an opportunity, those of us that are podcasters, to get better. And I would love to start with kind of what's the first part of your process when it comes to improving an existing show?
Absolutely, it is knowing this, and I'm going to give you just 60-second digression here. When I was in graduate school, I took an entire course on the book Ulysses by James Joyce. I do not recommend doing this, dear viewers and listeners, but I did this. One of the things I took from that book was one of the main characters in that book, Molly Bloom, was asking about somebody that her husband had just talked to. She asked this question of him: who's he when he's at home? And that's a very Irish way to ask that. Who's he when he's at home? But that's the first question that I think you need to ask yourself. Who are your listeners when they're at home? Your listener is not a male 25 to 54. Your listener is going through something. Your listener is going through something that's shared potentially by a lot of their listeners. They're a complete person. And the reason that they're listening to your show and not somebody else's marketing show and not somebody else's sports show is something that you're doing that isn't marketing, and something that you're doing that isn't sports, that's appealing to who they are when they're at home. And the questions I like to ask about that are things like, and it seems like a simple marketing question, but it's not. Where did you discover this podcast? And I love to know the answer to that. You're going to get something that's going to be useful to you on two levels. On a superficial tactical level, maybe it tells you someplace that you should be marketing your show. Okay, great. Or increasing your spend, although you can't increase your friends and family budget, as you know. But the other thing it's going to tell you is, what kind of person are they? What else are they listening to? What else are they watching? Where does this place them in this journey of life? And what that can lead you to, and I'm going to give you, if you'll forgive another couple minutes here, what that can lead you to is potentially something that is absolutely show changing. And the best example of that is a show I listen to pretty religiously, which is the Ryan Russillo podcast. And Ryan Russillo is on the Ringer Network along with Bill Simmons. It's all owned by Spotify, but it's open so you can get it on any platform. And it's ostensibly a sports show. And Ryan is very intelligent, a great writer, always has interesting guests, but he figured something out about his audience and who they were at home that has led to, I think, one of the greatest features in podcasting. He figured out that a lot of his audience were 25 to 34-year-old men out of college into their first jobs, and they're a little bit lost on how to be an adult, and they don't have a dad or an uncle anymore to help them out. And they kind of looked at Ryan like Big Brother, because Ryan has been through some scrapes. He's had his issues. He's come out the other side. And he would start to get these emails from people, not about sports, but, they would talk about situations that they're in and like, what's Ryan's advice about it? And I think that kind of blew him away. And it became a regular feature. It's on every show, called Life Advice. And it's Ryan and two of his producers. And this is important because they fit into the demographic of his listener, where Ryan does not. Ryan's older. And they do this sort of life advice thing. And, it's mostly guys, but not always, a little bit younger than Ryan, a little bit lost, asking the kinds of things that their dad or big brother should be telling them. It's not sports. And it's the reason I continue to listen to the show. It's funny, it's heartfelt, and it's completely sticky. And it's all because he knows who his audience is when they're at home. They're not sports fans. You got to do better.
Okay, so first of all, I love that. How in the world do we get at that information when you and I both know that most people listening are on the go when they're listening, right? So how do we get at that kind of information? Like, and how do we get it? And what are some of the other questions we should ask?
Yeah. And these don't, I'm not even talking about doing a survey. Like we're light years from that.
Okay.
Just have conversations with people on social media. People want to engage with you about the show. So when you engage with them and someone reaches out and says, "Hey, I love your show," write them back and ask them one of these good questions, right? Ask them, where did you discover the show? Ask them what else they listen to. And what else they listen to, again, is about figuring out what is your place in their mind. What space do they occupy? What space do you occupy in their mind? And when you know that, when you could super serve that, you focus on that like a laser, you're going to find people who also have that space in their mind. Because ultimately the best way to do a podcast, I think, is to do it for one listener and one very specific listener. Put a real set of clothes on that listener, give them a name, give them a job, give them a circumstance, give them kids, whatever, and be really, really specific about that. So find out, who they are when they're at home, what else they listen to, what else they watch. And here's one of my favorite questions. I call it the eulogy question. If you ask people what they like about your show, people are not particularly articulate to the positive. They'll say, "Oh, I don't know, it's interesting, it's funny." You're not probably going to get a lot more than that. But if you ask them a question, and this may sound a little mean, but it's not, that's kind of grounded in loss. And I love this question. If this show went away tomorrow, if it were canceled by the podcast gods, what would you miss? What single thing would you miss the most? People will tend to get a little bit more specific about that. They'll tell you something, and I bet for the Ryan Russillo show, it would be life advice and not interviews with sports figures, right? And once you figure that out, you start to know a little bit more about your audience, and you start to understand, not I need to expand that segment, but what are the other ways you can sort of double down on that feeling? And I'll give you one last question, if I might.
Yes.
People always ask, how long should my podcast be? And, there are some standard answers to this. You'll see a lot of people who are podcast consultants go, as long as you need to tell your story and not a moment more. And that's a really hard thing to figure out. And then, there was my answer, which is probably a little bit shorter than your last one. But I'll give you a better question to ask your audience, right? Ask them if they would like the show to be longer or shorter. And then after that, depending on what the answer is, I would like it to be shorter. All right, what would you cut? Or what would you expand? What would you want more of, right? Don't ask for a time. Like, what is that going to tell you? Like, 22 minutes. What is that going to tell you? That doesn't tell you anything that's going to make your show better. What would you cut to make it shorter? What would you expand to make it longer?
You're probably going to
really
find
specific
stuff.
Questions.
You're probably going to find stuff like cut the stupid banter that you have at the beginning of the show and get to the meat, right? Or we've got a lot of friends who do podcasts and they tend to act like they just haven't spoken in a week and catch up with each other before they get into the show. And it may be that they actually love that part, or it may be that they actually don't love that part. But the good news about what I love about your questions, it's probably going to come as a surprise to us as podcasters, right?
Yeah. And look, we didn't start with that banter really, but it's coming out now, isn't it? Right?
Yeah.
It's coming out organically. There's not a lot of throat clearing at the beginning of the show. You sort of have to trust that you can bring that out. But if you start with that, how was your summer? Oh, nobody really cares about that. You have to open up every show as if your audience is brand new. They don't know a thing about you. They don't necessarily care about you, though some do.
Right.
And then you bring up that stuff organically. And if it doesn't come out that way in the recording, well, it's got to come out that way in the editing.
Love it. Okay, so the first part of your process really is to understand intimately who that ideal listener is that is listening to your show, and ideally ask them some questions. You can accomplish that through social media. You can obviously do it through a survey if you have more access to your audience via alternative mediums. All right, let's assume we've got some of that. What's next? What's the next part of your process to improve?
Well, I like to think about, and this is sort of a, Harvard Business School thing, jobs to be done, and not necessarily the jobs to be done by your podcast, but think about all of the voices and the activities on your show. They each have a job. What are the roles and goals of everybody on your show? And there's a show that I listen to. It's about, I'm a big board gamer. I love board games. And there's a show that I listen to about board games that has 5 hosts on it.
Wow.
And all right, I listen to this because I'm a giant dork and I'm in the industry and I listen to everything. But I know that a lot of people don't like this because it essentially comes off like a panel where a couple people say something and a couple people say, I couldn't agree more. And like, that's not what
for the record, nobody ever, as a conference guy, I'm just going to lay this out there. Panels are the worst content always, no matter what, because you're either going to have 5 people that don't belong up there, or you're going to have one person who dominates the thing and is really smart, and they're not given the entire stage. It's never ideal. I can't even imagine a show with 5 hosts. Wow. But hey, I guess if they're in a super niche and they're good at what they do, maybe they can survive that kind of situation.
Yeah, but look at Seinfeld, one of the greatest shows in history, had 5 or 6 main characters, right? Cheers, another one of the greatest shows in history, had like 7 or 8 main characters and a bunch of spinoffs.
Right.
They had very distinct roles and they had very distinct goals. And I think people need to be able to, especially in a predominantly audio medium, they need to be able to slot what's the job of this voice? Why is this voice on the show? Is it just somebody that sounds a little bit different than the other person, but they're kind of saying the same thing? And that doesn't mean that you have to like play a character, but I think it does mean that you have to focus on what's your job. What is your job on the show, and do you have one? And I think, and even in a show like this, and I'm going to give you one of my favorite interview example shows, right? There's an interviewer named Alex Bloomberg, and he founded Gimlet. He came from Planet Money, Planet Money and NPR, had Startup and a bunch of fantastic podcasts. And much of his content is him interviewing somebody, right? And you might think, oh, his role or his job or whatever is interviewer. That's not what he does. What he does is serve as an advocate for the audience to ask stupid things in a safe place. He asks questions even at the expense of making himself look uninformed, which he most certainly is not, because he knows that the audience might be afraid to ask it because they might look dumb. So if he's interviewing somebody about the economy and somebody mentions cap and trade, like Alex won't say, now for the benefit of those of you who don't know what cap and trade is, and he won't say, he'll go, oh, what's cap and trade? Like that, the audience sort of breathes a sigh of relief, like, I didn't have to look stupid there, right?
Yeah.
That's what Alex Bloomberg does, is he's not afraid to look like the least informed people so that the audience has a safe space to learn. And that is such a great technique for any interviewer, I think. I think in any podcast, you need to have a job. And I know you remember this. Years ago, I did a podcast with Mark Schaefer.
Right.
And, he and I could have out-egoed each other for years, but we actually had sort of a tacit agreement. And Mark was kind of the straight man and I was sort of the cut up on the show, right? Well, Mark's a funny guy too. But that was a sort of a sacrifice in a way that actually defined who we are very distinctly. And a lot of people came back to the show for that relationship, even though we were talking about the same marketing stuff as anybody else. So I'm not putting that out there as an exemplar, but I am putting it out there as something that we thought about.
Fascinating. So just out of curiosity, I'm most familiar with interview shows because I create them and I consume them almost exclusively outside of a few shows where they're fiction or nonfiction, like, Business Wars would be a great example, where they're actually telling stories about like businesses with actors and all that kind of stuff. But mostly what I listen to is interview shows. I'm just curious from your take, do you find that there's a lot of people doing solo shows And B, are there also a lot of people doing like multiple host shows? I'm just curious to explore that with you a little bit.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of interview shows, right? I would like to see more solo shows in a lot of ways. I would love to see solo shows. And I think you don't see a lot of them because they are hard work. And, each week I do one. I do a solo show each week. I do our weekly Sounds Profitable podcast. And it's the Wednesday article, basically. And it works, I think, very well for two reasons. Number one, regardless of what it sounds like, I have scripted the entire thing. I am not meandering. I'm not reaching for words. I'm hitting exactly the way that I would have wanted to hit that point, right? And then number two, it's mercilessly short. The Sounds Profitable podcast is 9 or 10 minutes a week.
Okay.
It's really difficult to do great solo content. I think you need to have a very specific point of view. You need to think about it. I believe you need to script a solo podcast, at least, even if you're not reading it off a teleprompter when you actually do it. I think you need to write it out, because where people go wrong, this is really in the weeds now, Mike, but where people go wrong on solo podcasts is in transitions. They know what the bullet points are. They get lost going from one to the next. And that's the stuff you really need to kind of have a plan for. And if you can't write a great transition between two bullet points, those two bullet points don't belong together. So I think solo shows are actually really, really difficult to do. I love two or more hosts that aren't necessarily guests if they have distinct jobs and points of view, if there's a reason for there to be two or three.
Yeah, real quick, for those that are thought leaders that are listening right now that want to start a show, I've seen a lot of thought leaders take someone else inside their company or a co-host to ask them questions so that there's a little bit of interaction, which kind of lightens the load a little bit, right? Where like if Tom was to start a show where he didn't have to have it as scripted, he would have probably working bullet points conceptually, extemporaneously that he could speak to. And then he would have somebody, a co-host, who would know how to prompt Tom and ask those questions so that the load wouldn't be as big on Tom. I would imagine I've seen a lot of people do that, Tom. I know that's probably what happened with you and Mark. I'm sure Mark had the main script and you were there mostly to just kind of keep him focused and stuff. And you brought some points to the table. That seems to be a happy medium with a two-person kind of show where it's not a different guest every week, but keep going with where you were going.
Yeah, well, I mean, you just went where I wanted to go, and I think every show needs a traffic cop. Every show needs a main driver that cannot fall on more than one person. That cannot be a shared responsibility. I think every show needs one traffic cop.
Yeah,
and
that's me right now.
and that's you. That's you right now, right? And you have a very good system for that in terms of highlighting or shrinking my picture when you want me to talk or shut up, as for people watching this.
Right.
That's that. And I'll give you my favorite example of that. I've worked with Elvis Duran since the mid '90s. And if you're not familiar with Elvis Duran, when I started working with him, it was Elvis and Elliot on the morning show on Z100 in New York. But today, the Elvis Duran morning show is syndicated on, I think, between 80 and 100 iHeart Top 40 stations all across the country. He's an exceptional host, genial, funny, and there's always about 8 people on that show, right? But Elvis has control of everybody's mic. And he is the traffic cop. He's maybe the greatest traffic cop in all of radio. And he is constantly working hand signals, motions, signs that only the staff knows. I want more from you. I want you to stop now. Get to the point. They're able to see that, and he is like a great director, right? He's like the Ridley Scott of radio morning shows, because he knows I need more, not just more out of this person, but I need someone to stand up and represent this point of view more. All right, this other point of view is getting steamrolled. Let's cut this because somebody in the audience does not agree with this. Let's bring out that point a little bit more. And that is a complex, that is a nuanced job, made all the more difficult because of how many people are on that show. But I do think when you do a show, especially with 3 or more people on the show, including yourself, you need to have an agreement about who is going to be the traffic cop.
You have done a great job up until this point, kind of hinting at what's about to come next. Because earlier you said you need to sometimes do some brutal editing, right? So generally speaking, most podcasts are not live shows. Generally, they are recorded, like this one is recorded. So talk to me about the editing side of things and how maybe we need to be merciless about how we edit these shows.
Yeah, you really do. And to start with, I want to pick apart one of my least favorite words in the world, and that's authenticity.
Mm.
And you hear people in podcasting talk a lot about, I want authenticity. I want it raw. I want it brutal, unscripted, and so on. Well, don't tell me what's authentic to me, right? On this podcast and on my podcast, and when I'm on stage, I never swear. I never swear. If you're talking to me off camera, I swear like a sailor, right? And someone might say, well, that's not authentic, and we're not getting the authentic you. Yes, you are. You're getting exactly who I want to be when I am talking to groups of people, so that my point does not get lost by potential misleading language. I'm being extremely authentic in both moments, right?
Yes.
So editing does not mean stripping away authenticity. Editing means honing exactly what it is that you wanted to say and not screwing it up, right? So let's just set that aside. I think, step 0 in podcasting is not to do any editing at all. And you will hear people sort of rationalize that after the fact, saying that they're being authentic and so on. But you're not actually doing the audience any favors. You might feel good about it. And maybe you don't have the time to do it. That's fine. Maybe you have a day job and you're not able to edit. That's fine. That's fine. Make your art, but you don't have the right to expect to grow an audience like that. Level 2 is or level 1, I should say, is when you remove extraneous ums and ahs and noises and traffic horns and things like that. And that's sort of hygiene level editing. And I think you should always do that. But the next level, I think, is when you listen to the flow of a show and you realize, you know what, this thing that I asked later on really should have come before this other thing that I talked about. And you have to really sit back and listen to your show objectively as a listener and saying, what would the listener's next question be? If I heard this comment, what would the listener's next question be? And in the recording, you may not get to that right away, but there's no reason why you can't get to that next in the show.
Oh, that's intriguing. Okay.
That's another thing that Alex Bloomberg
You can move
does
stuff
really well.
around, basically, is what you're saying.
Create a narrative arc. Every segment should answer the next question, especially on an interview show. And that's the next level, right? And yeah, that takes some time. And what will that do? That will naturally make your show shorter, which is not a bad thing. It's a positive side effect of that, because A, you're going to cut out a lot more extraneous things, and B, you're going to realize that's a lot of work and you're not going to talk so much. So I think editing is where a lot of things fall off the rails. And if I could give any podcaster one piece of advice, it's to take a show, take one you thought was good, take what you thought was your best show, send it to a company that will have a human transcribe it. Like every mouth noise, Rev.com will do this. You have to spend a little bit. It might cost you $30 to $50 for a show, but get the book of a show. Every every ah, every ellipses, everything, and then read through it with a red pen and tell me you couldn't make that show better. You darn straight you could make that show better. It might be a horrifying exercise for you, but it's the first thing that I recommend to any podcaster who is serious about growing an audience, who's like, you know what, I want to take this to the next level. I'm willing to do a lot more work to achieve another rung of success in podcasting. It's the first thing I recommend.
And something very similar to what you're talking about is what I do that I know is unique, because I've had so many, I've done like 1,000 interviews, and most people tell me nobody does what you do, Mike, very rarely, but I do a pre-con with all my guests. And I did it with you, Tom. And I asked a lot of questions to understand how the show was going to flow and what we were going to talk about. This allows me to increase the quality of the output, decrease the need to do a lot of editing, because I know exactly where we're going in this flow. And it's almost like pre-editing, because I'm prepping my guest, in this case, you. And not everyone will want to do this, but I'm prepping my guest to understand the arc of my show, how it works, the timelines and all that kind of stuff, so that when we do the actual interview, there's very little editing that we have to do outside of the editing of the obvious things, that go wrong. And I know I've learned that, the more successful shows do this kind of work. They treat a show like a storyboard, right? And they've got, it's almost like a little movie that they're producing, and they've got a lot of this stuff. But I don't know, I'm curious from your seat, because you see so many big shows. Do they generally have prep work with their guests, or do they tend to be just just ridiculously good on the back end, on the post-production editing.
I want your listeners to know this. You are one of, if not the only person to ask me do this work in podcasting. And it is 100% the mark of a great professional show. Because you know who else does it? Larry King always did it. Charlie
Oprah
Rose
Winfrey,
always did it.
Yeah.
Howard Stern does it.
Yeah.
Anytime you call in to a radio station to give your point of view on a talk show, you have been pre-screened by somebody who gets you to talk for a while. You're like, all right, does this person actually, are they going to come to a point? Are they a bozo? How would you express it? Like, you'll spend some time on the phone with a great, especially like a national talk show, with a screener who's trained to do exactly what your prep call does. And, I will often see people talk about, I've been asked to be on a podcast, but they want me to answer all these questions. It's called doing your own research, duh. And they'll like get all uppity about it. But no, it is the mark of a great interview show, because it makes the conversation already work into an arc. You and I had a fantastic call going over the arc of this show. Does that make this show less authentic? 100% not. It is completely in the moment. There's lots of, ad lib. There's lots of extemporaneous things going on here, but it's driving to a point. I know it and you know it, and that's going to benefit the listener. So I heartily recommend people adopt that process. And if you get a request from a podcast that wants you on the show, a request to have a pre-call, a request to answer some questions, and your attitude is, I'm not going to do that, well, then that's fine. Relegate yourself to be on bad podcasts. But if you want to be on great shows, that is the work you do.
Tom, thank you for those kind words. For folks who want to find out about your company, Sounds Profitable, or want to get your new book, The Audience is Listening, where ought they go? And before you answer that, this is the Social Media Marketing Podcast. So if there's a preferred social platform that you're active on that people might want to connect with you on, also share that, please.
Sure. The main source of my company is soundsprofitable.com. All of our content is available there for free. All of our research is available for free. You don't have to register, sign up, or anything. I do hope you sign up to receive our newsletters each week. That's the only thing that we ask, but there's no registration gate on all of the research that we put out. You can read about the book at audienceislisteningbook.com. It's available pretty much on any online bookstore, and also I've sold a bunch of audio on Audible, which should not surprise you necessarily.
Nice.
And then, as far as what was the last part?
The social platform, if people want
social
to
platform. Yeah. I'm really much focused on two these days. I think for Sounds Profitable and podcasting related stuff, it's absolutely LinkedIn, and it's Tom Webster on LinkedIn. And I'm also really enjoying Threads lately for, dog pictures and things like that. So
awesome.
I believe I'm Webby 2001 on Threads.
Webby 2001. Tom Webster, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your insights with us.
Thank you. Really an honor to be back. And I meant everything I said about this show. You do the work, and I really do appreciate that. It makes a good show.